Hello, my name is Kyle Hirschfeld, and today I will be talking to you about British atrocities and the way American print media reported those atrocities during the Revolutionary War. So during the American Revolutionary War, the American print media played a large role in determining what Americans knew and how much they knew of it. By exaggerating certain events such as the Boston Massacre and drawing attention to certain others, such as the possible usage of germ warfare by the British, American newspapers were able to garner anti-British sentiment among American people. Additionally, the reliance upon atrocity narratives gave newspapers sensationalized events, which probably were more localized than they were widespread. However, despite this knowledge, certain British commanders, such as the Howe brothers, were unable to act decisively in order to curtail any crimes against civilians or POWs. With this in mind, it was ultimately a net positive that American newspapers utilized propaganda to the extent that they did, even though it may have exaggerated certain events, as newspapers drew such issues as the ill treatment of prisoners in New York and at sea to the attention of the public at large. Additionally, the usage of propaganda inspired leaders such as George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson to give orders that British soldiers be treated more humanely so as to be above the perceived barbarity of their British counterparts. Now, in Anne M. Becker's Smallpox in Washington's Army, Strategic Implications of the Disease During the American Revolutionary War, Becker argues that Washington believed that the British were using germ warfare against the Continental Army. Washington was afraid that the British had inoculated certain of their prisoners so that they would go into POW camps and they would spread the disease, smallpox. Becker argues that we can't disprove this, but we also can't prove it, but it's very likely that it did happen, as the British had historically used this tactic against Native American tribes. Now, Edwin G. Burroughs, in Forgotten Patriots, The Untold Story of American Prisoners During the Revolutionary War, talks about the ill treatment of American POWs at the hands of the British during the New York occupation. Burroughs highlights this story because it's a little told narrative in the history of the American Revolution. These men were captured. They were oftentimes left in disease-ridden places, starving to death. And Burroughs seeks to highlight this. He also mentions that many of these people were able to write letters and get these letters out of the POW camps. And many of these letters were printed in American newspapers to highlight these stories. T. Cole Jones, in The Dreadful Effects of British Cruelty, the treatment of British maritime prisoners and the radicalization of the Revolutionary War at sea, alleges much the same for American sailors who were captured by the British Navy. Ken Miller, in Dangerous Guests, Enemy Captives, and Revolutionary Communities During the War for Independence, argues the exact opposite in the case of the Americans having POW prisoners, British as POWs. He alleges that because the Americans had seen so much cruelty on the part of the British, they wanted to seem a cut above what the British were doing, and therefore they instituted policies that soldiers who had POW captives had to treat their prisoners humanely. So these were the two opposites. The British, who were unsure how to treat their American prisoners, as they were unsure whether or not they were a free people, whether or not they were still British people, because if they're British, you have to release them. If they're free, then you have to treat them as a rebel nation. So these are the different articles I referenced for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck with your research, and I'll see you next week.